So we don't need to record, write the minutes then, John?
You know, it might be helpful, Gina K, if you're willing to take notes,
Sure.
to go ahead and do that, and then Cindy doesn't have to try to rewatch the
Sure, I'll do that.
video.
Okay,
All right.
start.
So are we live on YouTube? That's what my little note in the corner says.
Oh,
You are live on YouTube. Yep.
All right. So calling this meeting to order, this meeting of the Akron Civil Rights Commission. We have a quorum. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Our last meeting was March because of the various postponements. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
motion, Esther Thomas.
Mr. Thomas moves. Is there a second?
Second, Nancy Holland.
Nancy Holland seconds. You guys are, you can tell, pros at online meeting. You know, you have to say your name so that everyone knows who it was. We're not all just calling out, I move. Any discussion or corrections? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. The next item is to consider suspension of our rules regarding in-person attendance. John, do you want to explain this?
Sure. So your rules allow you a majority of the members to suspend the rules for whatever reason. But you do have rules that require in-person attendance, in-person voting, and public comment. So I would recommend you consider a motion to suspend those rules. Substitute House Bill 197 passed by the state legislature in March does allow you to meet remotely and to vote remotely, whereas otherwise you would not be allowed. So if you make that motion and it passes, you would be able to go ahead and do your business tonight. Okay.
I was wondering, I'm glad you clarified that last bit. It was not clear to me that we could, you know, use the amended rule in order to pass the amendment to the rule. Any discussion of that? John, does that apply to the public comment? Could people come to the Zoom meeting and make public comment that way?
What city council has done, they didn't do it at their first meeting because they weren't sure how to go about it either. But what you could do in the future, we could, as part of the meeting notice, advise the public how they can make public comment, and they could either send an email or send it by mail, and then that could be read during the meeting as part of the comment.
They are otherwise, the notice lets them know that they can watch the meeting. Is that how it goes? So somebody could be watching, but they're not present sort of on our video.
Right, right. To participate, they would actually have to be provided a Zoom link. Like if you were going to do a hearing, the participant would be provided a Zoom link, and then they would be allowed to come into this meeting and testify or do whatever they needed to do.
Right, but council isn't for purposes of public comment, isn't giving the Zoom link out for people to do that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. They allow it by email or mail.
Okay. So just to understand, so any discussion or thoughts about that? I think the motion will be to suspend the rules requiring in-person attendance, in-person voting, and public comment. But to provide, well, I guess we can decide what we want to do with regard to public comment, whether we want to mirror what City Council does.
So moved, Nancy Holland.
We have a motion.
And are you including something in that motion, Nancy, about public comment?
I'm including exactly how the motion was framed by Brandt just now. It's my
Wonderful.
understanding that we'll do it in 2 steps. Am I right,
And-
Brandt?
Email or
Um,
email or written comment?
Actually, it hadn't been clear to me when I said that. So yeah, let's do it in two steps. Let's suspend the rules on those 3 items as mentioned in the agenda. And we can take it as a separate motion to adopt the council process for public comment. Do we have a
So
second?
Nanette Pitt will second suspending the rule.
All right. Any further discussion on suspending the rules? Greetings, Cindy.
Greetings. I just wanted to clarify, because I came in a minute late. The motion is, as per the agenda, is to suspend the rules on the 3 items that are listed in number 2 on the agenda. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
John, we don't have a public notice issue if we then adopt another, the motion to, a separate motion to
A
do,
motion
to do the public comment the way the council.
no,
wants.
that should be fine.
Yep.
No, that'll be fine.
Anybody who was concerned about public comment would know by our notice, right, that we were going to discuss it.
Yes.
So we should be good. All right, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. And Cindy, Gina Kay was taking notes at the beginning of the meeting,
Okay, I can get those from
so you
her.
can get those from her.
Yes. Sorry I was late. I had a contractor here. I was
Ah,
getting him out the door. Okay, I'm here now.
okay. And then we're going to follow that up with a motion to adopt a process for public comment akin to what city council does. Do we need to
So move.
specify
Nanette
that in
Pitt.
any other way?
No.
Well,
I
just
think well, okay.
for clarification, so I know what to put on next month's notice. Is there an actual ACRC, like generic email address?
I was going to mention that. I don't think there is. And I think that that would be the best solution. That's what we've done for a lot of other commissions, is just created a ACRC. It would be, at akronohio.gov. That email can then go to whoever you would like it to be forwarded to. It can go right to the law department's administrative staff, and then they can, make sure that's forwarded. Any comments are forwarded to the commission in the manner you guys would like. Most commissions have chosen to say, send it with the meeting minutes and the agenda for the next meeting as a bulk. These are all the comments that were received, as opposed to forwarding each one individually, so that you're not struggling to keep track of those and it's given to you.
There actually is an Akron Civil Rights Commission at gmail.com address that we use to set up the calendar that I'm not sure we use.
But Brandt, it would be nice to have somebody collate all the comments for us, so one
Yes.
of us doesn't have to go in and pull them all out of the email.
Right. I mean, there's both a question of the email address and who's gonna, who's gonna open it up and keep track of it. I don't think.
That'll happen at the law department.
Okay.
So I would like to move that we adopt the same practice that the city council is using, that we have a generic email set up at the city, and that someone in the law department collates those comments for us and sends them out with, and if any are mailed in, we'd also welcome them by mail, and then send them out to us with the agenda.
That's a motion, right? Is there a second?
Second,
second.
Nancy Holland.
I heard Nancy's second. Any further discussion? We could, John, we could work out whether we set up a new one or we use the one that there is, and I give you the access to it.
Sure.
We figure out, what
Yeah,
the
we can work that out later.
what the password is. Yeah. I would first have to remember what the password is in order to tell you. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Old business. So we have a complaint from the second complaint from 2019, and what's in front of us is to dismiss the complaint. Which this is the which case is this?
This involved
This is
advanced
McCarran.
resources,
Yeah.
McCarran,
advanced resources and Mr. McCarran.
Right. John, have you gotten any sort of final paperwork from either attorney, either party in regard to that they have gone through and made their settlement final?
Yes, I mean, they sent us a letter. They sent us a letter prior to the March meeting. Well, it was right around that time that they had settled, and they were that Mr. McCarran was withdrawing his complaint because at the board's direction, I then sent a letter acknowledging the fact that the board had, or the commission had received the withdrawal, and also pointing out that the commission at its next meeting would consider dismissing the complaint.
And John, can I just confirm with you that both parties to this were represented by counsel?
That is correct.
Yes.
And I copied the letter that I sent to each of the attorneys in that material that I sent out before the meeting. I don't remember their attorneys off the top of my head, but yes, they were both represented.
Riggins and Klingsherin.
Oh, Klingsherin, okay.
And Kelly,
And
will-
for the commissioners who are new, this is a complaint that was investigated, came to the commission. We found that there was cause, reasonable cause. It went to conciliation, and then they settled. Right. We of course have independent. You know, if parties presented us with a settlement that was unfair, that we didn't like, we of course don't have to accept it. But I don't think there's any indications here that.
we don't know what the settlement was. Is that right?
Correct. We do not know.
Oh, I thought we knew.
That's why I was asking about what, just to make sure that both sides were represented.
Mhm.
Do we have a policy about asking to review a settlement agreement, or do we need one?
I don't think we have a policy, but I don't think it would be out of. Doesn't seem to me like it would be out of. I don't know, the ordinary, out of line, to ask to see it.
Unless they have some, yeah, unless they have some agreement between them that it must be kept confidential, like a non-disclosure.
That's true, and then we can't keep things confidential. Is that right?
No,
Something like
public
that.
record,
No, we
right?
cannot. You cannot.
It's a public meeting, so.
And our results are public, so.
But we can acknowledge, this is Esther speaking, we can acknowledge that both, I mean, to Nancy's point, we really, it's great that they both had counsel, so that, you know, there's a certain piece to that, and we just acknowledge that they settled and that we accepted that settlement, you know, and both parties were represented. I think
Is it that we accepted the settlement, or is it that we accept the withdrawal of the case?
the withdrawal of the case, but acknowledge that the parties settled and that they were represented, and, you know, so nothing appears out of order, you know?
Yeah.
And we're not divulging that information if they choose not to make it public.
So, you know, like so many times this past year, we're doing this for the first time, right? This is the first case that has gotten to this point. And I guess I do want to sort of ask you more generally, do you think as a practice, right, since this is the first time, we ought to ask to see a settlement unless they have some objection to that?
This is Nancy. I've handled a lot of cases like this, and I know that many settlements, if not most, are subject to some kind of confidentiality. But I do think that it's reasonable and right, particularly if the respondent is represented, but the complainant is not. I think it gives us, frankly, greater weight, if you will, as being oriented towards fair outcome and protection of all citizens. It would seem like it's consistent with our mission that if one side is not represented, we ask to see it.
Right, because we can step in and at least review for fairness, right? I would hate to hear later that it settled in terms entirely, coerced and one-sided, and that we accepted the dismissal. So with regard to this case then, since they're both represented, if we feel like that's enough, we don't need to sort of establish as a precedent that we should ask for this one before we accept the dismissal.
This is Nancy
This one
again,
should be.
and I think that since they're both represented, that it's probably acceptable.
Gina K, you had something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to Nancy's point, I think we would probably want to put a policy in place so that we have that catch-all in the event that particularly the complainant does not have counsel, that they were handled equitably. So we would put that in place, and then all parties know going into the settlement that that information would at least have to be available to us.
Do you think it's good enough if we say in the minutes that that's our practice, or do you think that we need to sort of amend the rules?
I think it's good enough for practice because the idea of withdrawing and closing a case is already included within your rules.
Other thoughts about that?
What happens is, say the scenario that Nancy, this is Nanette, the scenario that Nancy proposed, the one side is represented and another side isn't. And then if we ask for the settlement details, what if they refuse? Or what if there has been coercion, so they've signed some kind of non-disclosure and then they refuse? So do we put it somewhere further up front so that both parties know our expectation? How do we message it out to them so that they know that coming up to that, like I'm thinking about a complainant, so that they know, hey, don't go and sign a piece of paper just because it looks juicy in the moment. Run it by us. Let us check it for you. Or
Good point.
I'm sorry I missed a small part of that, but I did just want to raise the concern that the commission has to be a neutral body. You don't represent the complainant. So I would discourage you from saying that you would look something over for one of the parties, either side, during the negotiation process or during the conciliation, to say.
Then maybe this does need to be more in the order of a procedural rule that prior to a dismissal, if both parties aren't represented by counsel, the commission has the right to review the terms of the settlement prior to ruling on whether or not the complaint may be withdrawn.
Maybe it's, I don't know if maybe this is something we can put on the agenda for next week and kind of look at maybe, John.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. This is a Zoom meeting thing, right?
It totally is.
Yeah, I think that if we put it on the agenda for next time, and if John will be in charge of drafting some language, and then if anybody wants to have any particular input about what that looks like, to let him know. Is that a decent way to go forward?
That would work. I think we can make that work.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I think so far the idea is that we want to be able to at least we can at least request to see settlements prior to dismissal, and that we would be, I guess if we just have the power to do that, we can choose not to exercise it when both parties are represented. So just thinking out different ways that could work. All right.
Would
Anything?
you, if you do that, then don't you also have to follow up with that and say, okay, if the commission deems that one party may have been not treated fairly as they should have been, then don't we also have to have a process built in place for that if we go that route?
Well, I think that but here's my initial reaction is, once we have the right to see it or ask for it, I don't think they have to provide it, right? If it's supposed to be confidential, that we are going to consider that in deciding whether to dismiss the complaint, right? And if it seems unfair, we're not going to dismiss it, right?
Okay.
And so that's kind of built into the process already, that it's
You don't
going
have to go
continue.
further. I agree, Brandt.
That's a good point. So it's not actually about us reviewing the settlement. It's about us determining whether or not to dismiss the case. I think that's what I had wrong earlier. Yeah,
Right.
that makes more sense.
Now, I have to say, I have not thought this through to the extent of thinking, okay, suppose there's a settlement, it doesn't seem quite right. We don't dismiss the case, like then what, right? Do we set a hearing even though both parties have reached an agreement? I guess that's what you do, right? I guess you go forward with the process.
John, is it treated the same in the rules regardless of whether a hearing has already been set? For some reason, my memory was that it's different after a hearing has already been set, and that's what was happening in this case, that they settled it after it was already set for a hearing,
Oh, that's true.
and that impacted the power of the commission to accept the settlement.
I guess I'm not sure the answer on that.
Okay.
So that's something to look into when we bring it up next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for purposes of the agenda item, are you just going to take time on that?
No, I think that for this one, we've decided that it's okay to say that since they're both represented, I think that was the sense of the commission. So speak up if I'm not getting this right. That since they're both represented, we don't feel like this is an instance in which we need to see the settlement, and that we can proceed to dismiss.
Okay.
And so at this point, we're entertaining a motion to dismiss the complaint. Is there such a motion?
So moved. Nancy.
I'll second. Gina K.
Sorry, bring up one point. Is this one, John, where people who were participating previously should be abstaining?
Oh.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Doing that for your
So-
benefit, sorry.
Gina K investigated and Cindy conciliated, right?
Right.
Nanette.
Nanette.
No,
Nanette,
Nanette investigated. Oh, that's right.
Right.
So we have a valid motion and second. And does that impact our quorum?
It shouldn't.
But you still have 4 other people, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
oh,
you still have 4.
I can't count to 4.
I'm doing
apparently.
Zoom math. I'm counting.
Just count the little squares, Brandt.
Yeah, I got it.
Brady Bunch.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have a quorum. Okay, and we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries in the judgment of the chair.
Should we have announced our abstention right then?
Yeah, let's note for the minutes that Nanette and Cindy abstained.
I did. Can you tell me who seconded that motion? Nancy
That
made
was
it. Who-
Gina K.
I did.
Gina K? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, while we're still on this, without getting into greater detail, maybe it could be put on next month's agenda. I had brought up with John just a question about, at some point, can we as commissioners talk more openly about a complaint from the educational aspect? what happened during the complaint, was about what transpired between the two sides, kind of a thing. As I said, I think it has educational value. Maybe it could be discussed without, naming specific parties and discussed in a more general way. But I would imagine that the other commissioners would have questions about really this was the second complaint in 2019. So what transpired and took all this time, and, kind of who did what, how did the players fall in place, and things like that. It's just submitted for your consideration. Not just this complaint, but maybe the other complaints in general.
This is Nancy. Is there an executive session available to us, or deliberative process type?
We've talked about this, and I was under the impression that we did not have that kind of authority in any statute. It did seem as though, I remember we talked about this, it seems as though we ought to be able to deliberate about a case.
Yeah, there's limited circumstances when that would arise. Which I can't tell you off the top of my head right now.
Because they're a secret.
Yeah, but because this is a public body,
yeah.
Doing public work, and the Ohio laws just are very limited on what you can do, when you can go into executive session.
So that tells us when we have to have a meeting and close it, but and not let anybody else listen in. But I don't think that tells us whether we can talk about a case, right? Because the investigation.
Well, especially Cindy is referring to, is talking about just the process in general terms, things we've learned over the course of the work. I mean, that I think that is, there's nothing inappropriate about discussing those things. If you'd like me to add that as an agenda item onto next month's meeting.
I have the rules up too, if anyone would like to hear the section about executive session from your rules.
That'd be great.
So it says, the commission may hold an executive session only after a majority of the quorum determines by roll call vote to hold an executive session, and only at a regular or special meeting for the sole purpose of the consideration of any of the following. And there's 3 bullets. 1, conferences with an attorney for the commission concerning disputes involving the commission that are the subject of pending or imminent court action. Matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes, or any other matter permitted by Ohio Revised Code 121.22G, which states, if I can get it here. Essentially, the members of a public body may hold an executive session to consider personnel matters is one large exception, purchase of property, conferences with an attorney, just about court actions, and there's several other kind of discrete exceptions, security concerns, things like that. Essentially, I think the exception would have to fall under something required to be kept confidential.
So it sounds like we could go into executive session for the purpose of asking John or Yamini to weigh in on legal analysis of a pending claim.
Or anything
else that way?
Or
anything else, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the court.
Okay, so we have some broad opportunity. I get that the whole meeting cannot go into executive session, but in order to maybe discuss the legal analysis for a particular matter, that would be available, right?
Correct. Yeah.
How does that work technologically? Do we stop the streaming?
Yeah, sorry about my cat. I was actually just thinking the same thing. I think we would have to stop the streaming and unfortunately basically start streaming again after the executive session, which would probably create 2 separate YouTube streams, but it would be the same link. So people would just have to wait until essentially the city of Akron YouTube went live again to know that you guys were out of executive session, as long as you're on Zoom.
Can
In
you
real
put the
life, you
exec-
just kick everyone out and talk.
well, I was
Unless
just wondering,
everybody
go ahead.
unless everybody puts their speaker, I mean, you could take your picture off and mute yourself and the stream could keep going.
No, because then you can't hear each other, right? I'm saying I would have to cut the YouTube stream.
Right.
The Zoom meeting would not stop.
Right.
The Zoom meeting would look exactly the same. You just wouldn't see in the corner that you were live on YouTube.
But I like your style.
Yourselves.
Did we lose
Ay, ay, ay.
Cindy?
This new reality has got me.
Upside down, I know.
Yeah, you know,
How did we
I've been on 6 different video conferencing platforms. Like they're all a little bit different. It's very confusing.
How did we do our training sessions? Because
So
we did training in the beginning.
Meeting, yeah, you can have an information gathering session or educational sessions that aren't publicly advertised or noticed, and the
I mean,
public.
aren't we talking about an educational opportunity?
So you're saying we could discuss those at a not publicly noticed meeting?
I mean, they're educational in my mind.
And could we hold that meeting immediately following the publicly noticed meeting? That's a little.
Did Cindy drop out of this?
Cindy
She
seems
did.
to have fallen off. Yes.
Right, and then I guess the question is, who was the conciliator?
Cindy was the conciliator.
Cindy.
Right, so if Cindy's interest is in speaking, I don't know that what she gathered from conciliation can ever be discussed, because I think that is kind of in a black box forever.
Right, it
Isn't-
cannot be
isn't-
discussed.
I thought that, is that true even after it's been dismissed? I mean, I thought the point was that it can't influence our decision-making, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, we'd have to go.
We'd have to look at the agreement, but I believe the agreement was that it would never be disclosed. That was part of.
Oh, that's right. They signed a conciliation agreement that was very,
It was to promote openness,
right.
bluntness. And in order to get them to agree to those things, we had to agree not to disclose anything that was learned during the process.
That's true, but I thought that was just at the hearing. But, and actually, let me tell you, I just got bumped off Zoom. I missed the last 3 or 4 minutes, so anyway, I'm back now.
Cindy, did you try to call me just now?
I did, I was just trying to get a hold of somebody to let you know I was off. I got knocked off.
Yeah, I didn't want to answer the phone. I was gonna, but
That's okay. I'm here again.
okay.
So let's do this. Let's put it on the agenda for next time. And in the meantime, we can look into exactly what it is that that Cindy can tell us or talk to us about with regard to that. And whether we, we'll figure out whether we can go into executive session or hold a separate meeting at the end of this one in order to learn something about how this process works for ourselves. I mean, I think it's worth thinking through as we, in the meantime, in principle, is there something here we shouldn't be hearing, right? And I would like to think about that. So if we put it on the agenda for next time, then we have time to think about it.
And again, I was just thinking about it for educational purposes, not just for like this specific complaint, but your past or whatever. Okay.
Okay. Is somebody have a voice in the background?
Right, thank you.
Okay. Let me pull up my agenda back up that fell off my screen. Here we go. So we voted on that, right? And we are done with that. The next item on the agenda in old business is B. I finally have contacted the complainant on this. There's one more step I got to do before I do a report. And I think that what we've been doing is not really doing interim reports, right? We report when there's a recommendation for the commission. So that is a hold one more time. But that should be the last time. And this one, there's much of this delay that is just been my fault for dragging my feet, and this one is getting pretty old. So this will be before us next time. And so that is old business B, and C is investigation 19 ACRC 13, and that is Nanette.
So mine is also still ongoing. I need
my
to request and receive some records.
All right. So that takes us to new business, and we had a new complaint. And John or Phil, I don't know if you have something to tell us about this. This is Yolanda Ford.
Can I just say, Phil, you're muted, by the way. Can I just say, there's something vaguely familiar about this person's name. I think this was like one of the, if I'm not mistaken, she was one of the early on cases that we had with Circle K. It's just sounding real, her name sounds very familiar.
Yeah,
Annette, did you feel
she-
that too?
Yes,
she made a prior complaint, yes.
Yes, okay.
yes. I
All
also
right.
wondered. Thank you.
Well, remember, we haven't met in 2 months, or for 2 months. Actually, it's been 3 months since the last meeting. You may have seen this when it was originally circulated. I want to say it was early April. I think she made the complaint on like April 8th. So you may have seen it then, but then I just resent it again today. So there's quite a bit of time in between. I don't recognize her name from the previous cases that you've resolved, but I can't say for sure. But what happened, Miss Ford was complaining about her treatment at the Dollar Tree. She was employed there for about a month. She did not like the way she was treated. She explained in her complaint that her supervisor was going to write her up again. And she responded that a write-up would get me fired, so I'm going to quit. And she is complaining of discrimination based on color and race. So the issues that you need to consider, if the complaint is complete and if it's been properly filed, then the rules say that you would commence an investigation.
Just to
And-
clarify, she filed a complaint, was the first complaint in 2019.
Mhm.
And it was against CBS, as Gina K mentioned. It was accommodation complaint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that doesn't, I mean, that's of
So-
perhaps of interest, right? Doesn't necessarily influence our process here.
No.
And John, often in these, at this stage, you'll highlight for us if there are any reasons that this gets kicked out for not being within our jurisdiction or not being a defendant that we can act on. Is there in this case?
No, I did not see anything like that on the face of the complaint that led me to believe it was an improper party or that it was untimely, or that it was outside of Akron, or that it wasn't properly completed.
Okay. And is there anything
Can I
else
cl-
to
can I-
know
can I-
before assigning it?
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yes.
I'm looking at the complaint that she filed, and doesn't it indicate Dollar Tree on South Avenue in Talmadge?
Yes,
Oh, does it say that?
yes,
Yeah,
574 South Avenue, Talmadge, Ohio.
out of our jurisdiction.
Out of our jurisdiction. Okay, good catch.
Or do we go with the fact that she's I guess, no, we can't. She's a citizen of Akron because we have another instance where it's flipped and the person lives outside of Akron, but the employer is inside the city limits. So she's outside of jurisdiction.
That's correct. My mistake. I just looked at it myself.
Is
it-
is there any issue about, sometimes the name of the address is not the same as the name of the actual jurisdiction. Is there any issue about that? I don't know where this is.
It really is Talmadge.
It really is
Talmadge
Talmadge.
South Avenue's Talmadge.
Okay.
So John, you'll send a letter.
Yes, I will. I will send that letter.
I think
And
we take an,
I will copy all of you on that.
so we take an action on this, right? I think what I do is entertain a motion to dismiss on the basis of no jurisdiction, geographic jurisdiction.
So moved, Nanette Pitts.
Second, Gina K.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. John, will you, I know that we have been in the practice of sending them out for, review before you actually send it. And we have sometimes talked in the past about what these letters should look like, and they're a little bit on the lean side, right? They don't say very much. And I just wanted to.
Well, I think we added we decided to add a sentence that says, not to say you have an actual case, but you may want to consider contacting the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. So we did add that.
Right.
I would recommend that they sort of be all uniform so that you don't get the complaint that you favored someone over another by not giving them the same information.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just wanted to make sure, especially because we have some new commissioners, to maybe pay attention to that letter, and if you have some thoughts about whether you think that's appropriate, because that is an item that we have discussed before. And the current letter is where we've landed, but I think that can always evolve. So, all right. Before we talk about community involvement and education, you know what, I have lost track. Cindy,
Yes, sir.
the news about the triad, has that been shared with the commission? I forget if that went out to everyone.
I believe I sent it to you and Gina K
Mhm.
for your distribution, but I have the email here from Marcia Triad. It's very brief if you want me to read it. Couple sentences.
So it's both the award and the
Radio spots.
radio spots. Yes, yes, if you would.
Okay, this is from Marcia Griswold at Triad. She wanted to let us know that the logo Triad developed for the Civil Rights Commission was presented with a Silver Communicator Award. The Communicator Awards are the leading international awards program honoring creative excellence for communication professionals. They will have a certificate for us when they come in and send out a press release as well. Thank you for your partnership and congratulations. And then shortly after that, she let me know that as part of this, the Summit 91.3 is offering to us 10 20-second spots at no charge during a 2-week period, 1 spot per day, Monday through Friday, and they would pick the times. And the start date is to be determined. 91.3 can assist us with the content of the radio spots, and Marcia at Triad said she can help tweak it if we choose to at no cost. So we're getting, we got this award. I don't know if you don't know, advertising agencies, the advertising world, they have awards. It's called the Addies. It's a once-a-year event. Triad frequently gets recognized and for their quality work. And so this is where we're at. So we got this award, and we have these radio spots we can use, which will help with our educational aspect for the commission.
So first of all, yay.
Yeah.
I mean, something to celebrate. That's very nice. And again, this is, ultimately, work that you really spearheaded, Cindy. So thank you.
Yes.
Um,
Commendations to Cindy.
yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's a
And
good
it's a very nice looking logo, so it's not as though it's undeserved. So great. What should we do in order to take advantage of this?
Well, I think with Ellen's expertise, we should ask her if she would like to draft something or be involved or.
So a 10-second spot is what we get.
10,
Yeah.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
20 seconds, 10, 20 seconds. All right.
That's pretty short though.
Talk fast.
That's 2 sentences, so.
There's barely time to say all our names. No, we wouldn't do
Out
that.
there, anyway.
How fast can you say Akron Civil Rights Commission?
Yes, right. If anybody has any particular thoughts about the content of these spots, it's a great opportunity. I mean, I don't know how great it is, what time, and what their listenership is, but it's a good opportunity to get the name of the commission out there. We
I
have.
would recommend
Go ahead.
maybe putting, drafting something brief from the last press release that Ellen sent out. I thought was very about how to file a complaint or, that we're in existence. Don't forget, reminder, we're here or whatever. And if you feel you've been discriminated, we have all that going on now between housing and employment. So it's very timely, of course.
All right. Cindy, you're in communication with them. Will you continue to coordinate with Ellen and keep us in the loop? And I'll try to remember to keep the rest of the commission in the loop as far as drafts of things as we go. Does that sound all right?
Is that all right with you, Ellen?
She's muted. Oh, she's back.
She's nodding. So
Yes, that's fine.
yeah. Okay.
Is this going to be one message or can we do several messages?
As I understand it, it would be one message. We can ask them if we could do 2 separate. Some it's very easy to work with.
If we could do multiple messages, it would be good to maybe do 5 and 5 and kind of alternate them. They would say slightly different things, but still have the core information. So it just depends on the content, but just for variation, it might be okay to have it tweaked a different way for half of them. So we have 10.
Yeah, I agree with the 20-second with the 20-second promos. Many times that's enough to sort of ask a question and then provide an answer by way of a name and a website or to direct them to that. So that, are you having, so there's probably lots of variation. I don't know how the summit, whether they, they pre-record them and then so they just plug them in when they have some time, but we could get, Akron Civil Rights Commission, direct them to the website, do a quick blurb on that. So yeah, we probably could get some variation in there.
You have to get somebody to read it, right? So because it's
I would
an actual voice eventually, right?
They're very professional at what they do. So unless somebody on the commission wants to do that, I don't care if somebody wants to.
No, it's a real skill to make yourself sound appealing on radio. So if they would record it for us, I would absolutely recommend we do that.
Yeah, I think as professional as we can sound is always better.
I think it's going to be just like I think it's going to be like a PSA, and then use one of their broadcasters will read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So I think that's all is there any other business that we had planned So I sent you around an email. I think that was late last night. Just letting you know that I don't know how we can be an entity called the Akron Civil Rights Commission and not at least consider whether we have some role to play in the great civil rights drama that is playing out on the streets in cities across the country. I'm mindful that we are not a group with a ton of resources, either institutional or otherwise, but we have some resources, and you know, honestly, our greatest weight in my mind is just that when you call something the Akron Civil Rights Commission, right, that people think that that stands for something. You know, they don't care or know, you know, how many, whether we have dedicated staff or, you know, or a budget, but that we could, and I have not thought through any kinds of sets of proposals. I have not drafted a statement or anything like that, but I thought that I would bring it to you and see if who, you know, had an idea and who would want to work on something that we might want to do. You know, I will say, I mean, at the very least, right, we could issue a statement. Lots of organizations and institutions are issuing statements. Whether we wanted to do anything beyond that, I think is for discussion.
We could do
Your
a letter
thoughts?
to the editor of the Beacon, and of course to the maybe to the newspaper in Columbus, and then maybe to the Akron Reporter. Those might be 3 places that we might write letters just to be on record, because I agree.
I'd love to work on this. I guess if there's any silver lining to what has been going on, I feel that there are some voices that I've never heard before. When you have somebody like Nordstrom's department store taking a public, compassionate position on the issue of racism and on the idea that people are more important than stuff, it's very powerful. And I guess my point is, it's not even their job, but it is our job to speak about this. I'd like to be involved with this. And I think that, you know, at the very minimum, I really like what I'm hearing all over Ohio. I just don't think it goes far enough. I think the statement I've seen most in the past 48 hours has been that racism is a public health crisis. Good start. I think we stand for way more than that. I know I'm new here, but you know, I've been a fan for a while, so.
There's no tenure on this commission. So you come in at the same level as everybody else.
That's true.
I'll work with you, Nancy. You know, you and I kind of
we get along.
Torch. We're always the torch bearers.
We are.
I'll work with you. And to add to that, not just Nordstrom's, I was really impressed when so many people who work for Facebook said, I don't want to work for a company like this if there's not some level of censoring what comes out of Washington.
Yep, right on.
I would like to work on this issue as well. Adding to what the other commissioners have said, is that this is an extraordinary time. I mean, we thought COVID was the most disruptive thing that could happen, but it really has illustrated that there's been an ongoing issue, and that all of these things are now coalescing to this time where if people who haven't spoken before are speaking, people who have been speaking continuously, maybe now feeling that they're being heard, So
Esther, if you can hear us, I think you
my
Blink.
mouse does things by itself, honestly.
okay.
Okay. But you know, this is the time to speak. I mean, this is what the commission, one of, you know, we have to talk. When you say civil rights, it means something, and this is how we bring meaning to that, is by acting, is by speaking, whether it's an editorial or a op-ed, a press release. It can be all of those things, but I think the message is, yeah, we have to be a part of that dialogue. I don't know if anybody heard that.
I absolutely
No,
agree.
we
and
heard that. Yeah.
So eloquently put. And I guess I would just like to add that to my colleagues on this commission who have experienced this in a very real, direct, immediate way, you know, I want you to know that you're in my thoughts.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I mean,
I think
go ahead.
I don't have the bandwidth to work on a statement per se, but I would want to add that I wholeheartedly think we should do one. I know that's a bit of a cop-out. I just want to be honest about my ability, given some other responsibilities. But I absolutely think that, and I know we've spoken about this before because we've highlighted that we don't want to come across appearing as if we are not an unbiased group and that we're meant to be that way. But we need to stand on the side of civil rights, because when people hear our name, that's what they know we stand for, and that's what they assume. And I very much joined the commission, and I know Brandt, you and I have often connected on this, is I really like the possibility of the educational element. I think if we go one case at a time, we make a difference in one person's life at a time, but there's got to be a more public voice. And I love the way we were put in place with the support of the mayor and so many other people in the city department and in the community, that this was something that Akron claimed. Like, we want to be a city that has this, that makes these kind of statements, that feels like we're moving the needle on issues like this. And I know it's in the way, in the face of an absolute torrent and a wave, but I think we have to take a stand. So I absolutely support us having a very strongly worded statement. And I think it's a good idea to write the letters to the editor, because I think they'll be published in a way that a press release isn't always.
Let me raise this issue. For this to be effective, I think it's going to have to be pretty quick. Like, I don't think that we can wait till next month, right, to review a draft. In a month, the whole thing may be over. I mean, of course, the issue will not be over, but the public attention. But I do think that exactly what the content is could be tricky. And I'm not sure that, I don't have a way to frame that for you right now, so exactly what issues, but it just seems to me like we might want to lay out some concepts here and not just say, okay, go draft something.
I think of some of the early statements that were made when that Akron United movement was happening, Ellen, and you were a big part of organizing all that, you know, statements about the way and then it was, a lot of it was worded what the mayor was saying about what we want Akron to be, you know. I think you can make those sort of statements without, I mean, I would propose those, let me end there. Those kinds of, like, we want Akron to be a place where, and we've worded that into our language since then too, a place that is safe and free of discrimination, that we're working towards that we want that.
Nancy, Nanette, I'm sorry, Nanette, that sounds aspirational, but I guess maybe I guess I would want us to speak to how we abhor what has what is taking place.
Stronger.
I'm assuming we would start there.
Okay,
Stronger.
all right, yeah. Some declaration on our part.
I think it needs to sound something like the Akron Civil Rights Commission exists in part because the people of Akron, Ohio believe that racism is fundamentally wrong.
So yes. To me, I'm realizing as we have this discussion, I think that the question is whether or not we specify that specifically the fraught history of the relationship between African Americans and policing, right? Do we talk about that specifically or not? And I recognize that that gets trickier the more specific you get.
Right,
But
right.
I'm a little bit less interested in, a generic, we oppose racism. Like that is not enough, I don't think, in
Right.
this context.
This is Esther speaking. I agree that it should be very strong and decisive, which is this is not appropriate. It's not effective. It is contrary to the aspirations of the Constitution. It's contrary to the founding, the Akron Civil Rights Commission, and it is just reprehensible. Brandt, to your point of the history of policing and African Americans, what that's about, the history of that, that's huge, and I think we should touch on that. But also this week, in addition to the death of Mr. Floyd, I'm still back on last Monday's attempted lynching, which is the bird. I mean, that is the part that still makes me, all of it makes me sick and ill. But when we talked about hate being weaponized and that police are the weapon of choice for bias, we have to stand. That's the part where I feel that, the statement of standing against that. Because in both instances, one, it was someone attempting to invoke the police as a weaponized executioner or to bring harm to this person who wasn't doing anything illegal, or and we saw that theater of that. The other part was the police actually fulfilling the call of being extra, okay, just being extra and being and we saw the result. So I would love to write on that. I'm a wordsmither, but I really feel I will help anybody write that, but it has to be strong and it has to be, these things are connected and they happened within 24 hours of one another. How are we as a community invoking the police, and how are they carrying the mantle of their action, the individual officers? And what is the mandate, or what are we asking them to be for our citizens, all citizens,
Esther, I'm sorry, can I back up?
Sure.
I cut out something. You said
Oh, you're right.
police are fulfilling the call of being.
I said extra because I couldn't think of the right word, but they were, which call are they answering? Are they answering to serve and protect, which is societies need, protection, boundaries, guardrails, or are they, are individual officers answering a culture of policing Black and brown bodies and other bodies in a way that's much more harsh and carrying out execution sentences when a mere citation or order to appear would be more appropriate.
I love your passionate words, Esther. I think you should write something and circulate it to everybody.
Okay,
Yes, give us a straw dog to work with.
I
okay.
had a interesting conversation in Hardesty Park on Sunday at that vigil demonstration
Yeah.
with a citizen about how this echoes back for local people to the riots in '68. And I think we need to be conscious of that as the Civil Rights Commission. And I know that around the forming of this group, there was an earlier iteration of this group that I believe was the result of the sort of reconciliation after the '68 riots, was putting a Civil Rights Commission in place that then became defunct and didn't operate. And I don't know all of that history, but I know that there are going to be tentacles for people into that history with our statement, and there is already with the formation of this group. And many of you, I see Ellen nodding, know the politics way better than I do. But I think whoever writes, before we send this off, we just need to be cognizant of that, because I think we could be a balm and an aid to those people, or it could hurt, you know. And I doubt it will, but I just want to raise it up because I certainly wasn't aware of that history, not having lived in Akron for long. But that history is here. And I think we need to attend to that history too, because that's where, I mean, this rot, we're living with the rot that is now hundreds of years old, right? Of unresolved, not doing reconciliation properly.
Yes. You know, I agree, Nanette. I think how I've been processing this, and there's a couple of pieces, which is, you know, I was here in Akron during that time, and I'll share that story privately with other members, but it's trauma. It is traumatizing and re-traumatizing African Americans. It is shocking other people who may not have been aware the extent to which this is not a novelty. This is not something that this is going on all the time. And so there's that frustration and anger that comes from that. But I agree, I think we should be sensitive to that. I think we should acknowledge the trauma and the ongoing trauma and spirit injury that these actions create for not just African Americans, not just for Black and Brown people, but for people who are on the other side of that and don't take responsibility for weaponizing the police in a way that they should not be used against other citizens.
I have to say, knowing,
I'm gonna,
you all know my background, just don't wipe, you know, this all officers on the same slate. You know, all officers are bad. I'm just got to caution you, which I know you were very smart. We're all very smart people, and realize that, yeah, that officer did extremely, I mean, he committed murder in front of the world. That doesn't mean, I mean, I have to just say, you know, we got to make sure that whatever's put out does not say that all officers are like that. And that,
no, of course.
Let me just add to what Esther said, and just for your reading pleasure, there is a book I would recommend to you all. I just completed it with another diversity group, and it's called White Fragility. The word fragile, white fragility. And then there's I guess the counterbalance book is the one that's entitled Black Fatigue. And it speaks to what Esther was talking about with respect to and again, Nancy, let me just say thank you for your acknowledgement of my pain on this, in this setting with us, this group of us. And, you know, I even pull back, we talk about George Floyd and we talk about that. And I'm even going back to Ahmaud Arbery a couple of weeks ago, who there were some vigilantes that decided to take the law into their own hands. So it's just been it's been a rough month and a half. If to stand in my shoes, it's tiring, it's exhausting. I'm worn down emotionally. I'm just drained, and I just want to say that I'm exhausted with all this. And Sunday of all days, just let me share this for a moment. My grandson was over. He's 10 years old, and he asked me, Mimi, what's all this going on the news? What's going on? And my grandchildren are biracial, and I had to take a moment, a teachable moment, to talk to him, and I took that time. And I started in 1955 with the images of Emmett Till. And I can't overlook that, because my grandson will never get any benefit of being half white. President Obama got no benefit from being half white. So he's going to be walking in the shoes of a black man. So I had to share something that I just felt, and that was another downer for me. He's 10 years old. We shouldn't be having to have this talk, but if I don't, then what happens when he's 17 and he's driving and something goes off the rails because, somebody in the neighborhood, George Zimmerman, decides that he shouldn't be there, or, whatever. He runs into perhaps the wrong police officer. I'd love for him to run into Cindy and Phil, but he might run into somebody else. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you all for letting me just get that off my chest.
Gina K, I guess I want to point out that, it hasn't just been a bad month, it's been a bad 400 years. And, I guess, forgive me, and I certainly don't mean to offend law enforcement present in this meeting or anywhere else. But with all due respect, I don't much feel like we should tiptoe around. We witnessed a murder. The world witnessed a murder. So I'm not looking to indict all law enforcement, but I am looking to raise up the collective vibration of how our society deals with race. Gina K, your words, man, so moving. Your grandson.
Gina K, I think the fatigue that you speak of and the conversations that you need to have with family and the concern and the heart cry that I hear in what you shared, I feel like that's what we need to speak to in the reader. That's what we need to speak from and of, because the construction, ultimately, for me, coming from the outside, the construction of race in this country is built to damn people. That one drop principle is sick, and it still operates, and we're perpetuating race based on that. And so I think we need to decry the sort of the constructs in which this can all flourish. And I also want to say, I was thinking this after you spoke, Esther. I was thinking about reconciliation and what that really looks like, and the last 400, if longer, of course, years. If you look at the world's history, is there a way? And if we think back to '68 and what's real for people in Akron, and again, you all would know maybe better than me with longer history, but is there a time when we host a public forum? I'm coming from South Africa, where we had the TRC, and I know the catharsis that can come, because I think when you look at trauma, being able to tell your own truth and being able to, and for us to put a statement out that just speaks truth, I think that's part of, because I think what re-traumatizes people is when somebody else packages your truth up and puts a pretty little bow on it that suits them, and or denies it completely, doesn't even repackage it, just says it never, your truth never happened. And so is there a way that we become the facilitators of, or could we as the Civil Rights Commission become the facilitators of opportunities for people to tell their truth, to tie things together and to say, this is my truth, my lived experience on these streets.
So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, thank you, Gina K, for sharing that. And thank you, Nanette, for your comments, and Nancy for your comments. The acknowledgement of the fatigue, the trauma, the fatigue is important for personally and from a community basis. And Gina K wrote that, yeah, we did have the Coming Together project. That was that like 20 years ago now, or is that a little further back?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, series of town hall meetings, and I think the Coming Together project might have been awarded a Pulitzer for the Akron Beacon Journal. Yeah. So we might have an opportunity there, building on what Net said, to host those types of things. Now, there was the On the Table talks that started. I'm not sure, they didn't, did they happen this? They did happen this year.
Yes.
October 2019 and last year.
Yeah, October.
October. So that happened. So, you know, there probably is an opportunity there. I think, you know, we all have limited bandwidth, but we certainly at this time could work with a number of partners who might be able to be interested in partnering, you know, under a banner of the ACRC to do some of that kind of reconciliation work, restorative justice, peace. Talking about those things is very important. I'm not sure we have reconciliation in this country, Nanette, because, you know, we're still working on getting justice. You know?
Oh, thank you, everybody. Let me throw out these organizing kind of ideas. It seems to me that the first statement that we're going to work on trying to get out sort of relatively quickly is a relatively short, right, thing. There's time, if we want to explore some of the history, the 1968 commission report, whatever happened to that, you know, there's maybe some other time and place for a longer piece, right, that may be helpful for us to be involved in some way. I do want to, Cindy, your presence here is such an asset for us to have your perspective. These discussions go on all the time without that. But to respect that, I think that we should put on the table what's there, and part of that is that there has to be something between. Certainly not all cops, as you say, right? But also not just a few bad cops, right? There's got to be some way to talk about cultural problems in some police departments or systemic problems beyond trying to delineate the good cops and the bad cops, right? I'm not sure how we do that, but to me that's part of that has to be confronted, right? So to the extent that you have insight and thoughts about that I think that'd be so helpful for us to hear. I want to we had at one point, actually at the beginning of this year, so long ago, I was smiling when somebody else was telling a horrible story, and I want to be clear, I was not laughing. I was just thinking about how long, how quickly things happen. Talk about Ahmaud Arbery, and it's like, oh, how long ago was that? Like 3 weeks? It feels like, it feels like a decade. But it was just at the beginning of this year that there was a thought that I forget even their name, the Conflict Resolution Center at Ohio State, that convenes players in cities specifically to try to avoid confrontations over police brutality, right? That originated in the after the riots in the 60s, right? That they had offered to come up and see if we wanted to convene sort of more of a city conversation among the key players about how to strengthen relationships, right, for future occurrences. And I know that the mayor has talked about doing something like this. I'm on different terms, but I feel like I've read in some of the statements, you know, that there are plans of some kind. And I don't know if, you know, I don't want to nose into anything that we can't actually handle, right? We are a bunch of volunteer people with, you know, all of us with our own lives. So, but I just raise, you know, some of you have already mentioned the idea of having hearings and other kinds of discussions. So there's all sorts of further stuff to do, right? I mean, I think that we put that on the agenda for next time, that for the immediate time, we have a couple of volunteers who are going to work on a statement. We're going to try to get that out really relatively quickly. We've had some ideas about content. I think recognizing that this relatively short statement doesn't have to include everything, right? Those are my thoughts. I don't know if there are there loose ends here? Ellen, I don't know if you have any suggestions or reactions.
Oh, actually, I really enjoyed listening to everyone talk about a communications issue and not having to feel like I had to participate at all. I was just actually thinking that this is one where I don't see any legal issues, you know. So I was thinking that you know, John and I and all those people would just sit out unless there was something that we could do to help you, you know, and let the commission just truly develop that content of that statement, you know, independently. But if there is anything, you know, that I can do to help, I'm happy to, you know, to help edit or distribute or whatever might be helpful to you guys. Really appreciated everyone's comments, and thank you everyone for your vulnerability. That's been a very powerful part of my day today. So thank you.
Brandt, was there an expense involved in getting that conflict resolution group to come in? Was there some expense? Okay.
No, you know, and they're so, since we would do everything by Zoom anyway, I think it would be pretty easy to just ask her to attend our next meeting and make a presentation about what their center has to offer, if you'd like that. I can go ahead and revive that connection if they might be kind of busy now. But you know, if they're available and would like to come talk to us, I can do that.
I also would want to offer to you that I have in my house a husband who was a journalist in South Africa and covered the TRC, and is currently doing his PhD in peace building at the University of Notre Dame. So, and he's done he did the conflict thing at Harvard. He has a degree from Harvard. So Stephen might be a resource that at some point we want to pull in. He lives and breathes and is studying this stuff, and it is everything that it's his fiber. Coming from our cultural context, this isn't far from our hearts ever. So.
Annette, for the purpose of the meeting minutes, is that based on conflict resolution as well, or is there something else?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, conflict. I mean, now they're calling it peace building because they don't want to focus on the conflict, but it's the same thing.
Well, let me ask this procedurally. There's, I think Esther was volunteered to circulate a first draft. Are we comfortable? What kind of sign off do we want to have on this before it goes out?
My thought is that I would draft something and send it to the commission as a en masse document to which the commission's name would be signed, all, you know, collectively, and maybe Ellen and John could do some final wordsmithing for us, or bless it, or, you know, I know you don't want to be doing the heavy lifting, but certainly we would run it past them, and then I think the chair should decide.
aren't we the mayor's commission?
Um,
It's in our title, the mayor's commission. So with the mayor,
I don't
We're
think
not-
so. The mayor
Okay.
appoints us, but we're the Akron Civil Rights Commission.
okay.
Yeah, I think this is one where, you know, we've all kind of wondered how the independence of the commission really works because there's so much, you know, interrelation and collaboration with, you know, city staff on different issues. Again, I think as personally or as the mayor's spokesperson, I'm happy to provide whatever would be meaningful to the commission, but I do not want you to feel that you have to get any kind of sign off from city administration staff as far as content to what you would like to say in the message. So again, I'm only here as a resource and a help, but I don't think Mayor Horgan's name really should be on this anywhere. It's not really his statement or his, you know, there's nothing really to do with the administration on this. I think this is where the commission sort of is acting, you know, very much as your own body.
I guess what I was thinking was, in terms of sign off, was among the commissioners, so that, you know, it's going to go out under the name of the commission, not any particular, right? Not certainly not the chair. Do we need to have no objections? I guess that's what I'm assuming, that a statement will go around, there'll be some opportunities to comment, and then at some point I'll say, if there are no further objections, we're gonna send this out, and then we'll send it out.
And I'd like to, I guess, be pretty blunt here. This is not my lived experience. I've experienced a great many things. And my point in saying that is that I think we should all kind of make a deal right now that we're not going to revise and revise and revise and revise and trade this word and trade that semicolon and this phrase. I have a lot of trust in the ability of Esther and Gina K to talk about this. And I'll tell you what, this is for me, it's about learning in part. So I'm not inclined to do much revision, and anybody who's worked with me knows that that's pretty hilarious because I'm the queen of the red pencil, okay? You know, speak beautifully for us. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
I think we have a pretty good track record of having that spirit, Nancy, on the commission. We generally don't nitpick, you know, we're looking at the spirit of the thing. So I think you'll fit right in and you'll find that tone to already be part of the tone of the commission. And I think, Esther, it's great that you take it on. I know that I feel from my lived experience that it is important that I don't just leave this work to the people who are suffering from it. So know that, you know, I think it's important that it is the commission statement as a whole, and that we do bring what is important to it. And I like groupthink, but I agree not to be nitpicky about it. And Brandt, I was writing I was going to put it in the comments, but now I'm talking anyway. But I appreciate it when something goes out, you give us a deadline. You know, comments by 12 o'clock tomorrow or something will help me to know, okay, I need to deal with that now because I know that we need to get this out.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Are we good on this? Anything else to make a decision about?
Final thing, only because it might be easier to deal with this here than in email, is do you guys want to decide now that you just want it to go out like a press release and I can have the contact either be me or it can be any one of you as spokesperson on this issue of media, or anyone wants to follow up? Do you want it posted on the website? You know, do you want to treat it like that kind of a statement? Again, completely defer to your guys' choices there.
Can we see what it looks like? You know, can we see how it ends up and make a decision from there?
I think as a default, yes, but it's possible that it will look more like, well, no, I guess I think that probably would work. But yes, no, I mean, you know, we can, I mean, how else would it go? I mean, I guess,
Letter to the
Do it
editor.
yourself, right? You could do it yourselves and not.
well, then one of us would be responding to any inquiries,
Well, and that's the thing is,
Right.
you know,
right?
this is one where you might not want me
Right.
to be responding to media inquiries.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Didn't we say
And
before that
But
Brandt,
later, I thought it might be easier to
Brandt is our media contact person? The chair is the contact person?
That has generally been true as far as sort of inquiries from other bodies or whatever. I think that if it, I mean, otherwise, what do? You release it? Do you have to give a contact?
no, you absolutely
I mean,
don't.
I
You
don't-
don't have to do any of that.
Brandt, I think you'd be a great contact for this.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we should also do a version as a letter to the editors.
Right.
Well, so do you send it to the newspaper as a letter or as a potential op-ed piece?
Op-ed.
Op-ed.
That's
Either.
usually a separate submission.
Yeah.
On the.
I like the op-ed.
And it doesn't have to be the only message. In fact, as we, go back to those 20-second promos and, part of the charge of the commission being education and outreach and getting people to talk about civil rights and accommodation and housing, those things. It doesn't have to be a one-off. There's plenty of jerky to chew. And so that, maybe this is a press release and then next week it's something else, but it doesn't have to be a one-off. And so if we start with a default of we want to speak in the moment, and that mechanism is a press release, let's do that. And then we can plan for the next thing because it doesn't have to be a one and only.
Right on. Yep, makes sense.
Although we've done press releases before and then I don't see them published.
Hmm.
And I don't know if we're
Letter to the
tracking that
editor.
in any way.
Maybe
Well-
Ellen could help with that, with knowing really where we should send it.
Yeah, I mean, unless
Legal news would
of
probably.
it and knowing how newsworthy what you say might be, I would think it would probably be white noise at this point. To someone's point earlier that if Nordstrom is issuing statements and Target is, it's like everyone has a statement, and that doesn't mean it doesn't serve a purpose. Again, it can be on the website, it can be put on social media. There's other ways to get your message out. But I think an op-ed has actually a pretty decent chance of getting picked up. So
Especially because you've got connection with some of the editors, right?
Sure, and also I just think the content is, it suits itself to an op-ed, I think, especially given that you're speaking as a body as opposed to one person, trying to represent. You guys, again, Brandt says, you're called the Akron Civil Rights Commission, so I think you're given some kind of, that makes it feel like you speak for civil rights in Akron. And so I think the Beacon would, at least the Beacon would be, open to that. I don't know, but I think it would have a good chance of getting run. So, and maybe it just blends itself more to that kind of narrative as opposed to a press release where you're announce some news. It's like, you're really trying to say something in sort of a letter form to the community.
Maybe as a statement, it could go on the website on our page.
I have another, oh, am I on? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so as we are discussing this, and not to, wring it out too much, but it occurs to me that it not being a one-off is important, but I heard a lot of different perspectives. I heard Gina's perspective. I heard Chris' perspective. I'm saying your name wrong because I'm flustered.
Cindy, yeah.
Heard Nanette's perspective. And part of, to break through the noise, it may be that we all need to share our perspectives as commissioners so that it's not a one-off. And so, because we are the Akron Civil Rights Commission, but who are we? What does that mean? And so maybe this is our stories that we are telling. So it's, you know, here's a statement, here's a press release, but here's an op-ed from this commissioner. Here's an op-ed from this commissioner. Here's a letter from this commissioner, so that, you know, as we do this work, we're also, you know, being the powerfulness of being vulnerable and speaking our own truth, because we are holding that space for others to do that. So it's not, so then everyone would get in on the act of writing, but write it from your perspective about what it means to be a part of this community. What does it mean to do this work? And, you know, where are we in this moment?
I love that idea of making
do
it a
too.
series and having the individual commissioners' voices. I still think we should start with like one,
Yes.
one corporate statement, and then move on from there.
And I think it can be short. I imagine that right now we're all kind of inside our heads. You know, that voiceover, the voiceover of God, right? That says, oh my gosh, where do you even start? And we really are talking about more than 400 years.
Oof.
I think this can be, I think this can be core truth. What is the core truth?
So thank you, everybody. I think this is a great discussion. And we have our task in front of us. We will try to circulate things quickly so that this can go out quickly, but not too quickly, to give everybody a chance to really, you know, engage, and then we will go from there.
If I could insert just a moment of levity. I'm looking at your background, Cindy, and I just appreciate that there's an elephant in the room.
Elephants in the room.
There's like 10 elephants in the room. I noticed them when she came on because they're African elephants, I think.
Adults and babies from Africa.
Aw,
It's a beautiful painting.
wonderful.
And since we're at the end, I'd like to end on a high note. Today, University Heights became the 30th Ohio city to pass a comprehensive non-discrimination ordinance. Up to 30 jurisdictions in Ohio.
Yes.
There.
Okay.
Just before we close, on our regular agenda for July is when we elect officers. So that's chair, vice chair, and secretary. So consider, you know, folks should consider whether they're interested in one of those offices. People holding those offices should consider whether they are interested in continuing. I will say every year that actually I am seriously considering, and I should have made a decision before today so I could just tell you that not resigning from the commission, but stepping down as chair, for lots of different reasons. And I will let you know before long so that you have to consider for before we have the July meeting. So I want to put that out there for people to think about and consider. And if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.
Alrighty, thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right,
Thank you.
end the meeting for all, which will end the live stream as well.
Oh.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Still live streaming.